What's up, everybody? This is Justin Flinter coming to you live from Northern Virginia with the Justin Flinter podcast by My Metro Medicine. You might have noticed my absence the past week or so. I was literally off the grid. I had taken some time to spend the spring break with my family while my children were off from school. I took a little time off from work. I had a break from teaching. I had a break from treating. And on a Saturday after I had finished treating some patients, I decided that I would, with my family, leave town and be gone, and completely gone for about a week. A little bit more than a week, actually. We were gone for 8 days. We traveled across 5 states and drove about 2,200 plus miles. It was a fantastic time away. We got to do so much together. We got to spend some time together that we had needed for a long time now. But I wanted to talk specifically about what those 3 words mean to me. Off the grid. We spend most of our days, most of our time engulfed in the work that we have. We say we're too busy to do such and such. We're overwhelmed with the amount of responsibilities we have, even though we may not even say that. We have so many things on our plates, and we have what we think is very little time to accomplish those things, when in fact, actually, the amount of time never changes. It's just our ability to use the time that we have been gifted with. So my decision to go off the grid for more than a week with my family, it was actually easy for me because I knew that it was time. We scheduled it and planned everything accordingly. We had a great trip design, traveling south to several beaches, to some amusement parks, to do a couple various things that we wanted to do with our family for some time now. Finally put it into action. And that time of being away from all of the day-to-day that I put myself in, such as online and social media, doing these podcasts, writing my blog, sending out my newsletters, preparing my lectures, doing the actual classes, going to my day job, treating patients, all of the various things that I have on my plate. It was something I was reluctant to do at the beginning. I knew I would do it. I knew I would go off the grid, but I was curious as to what it would be like actually doing that, but also how I would be different when I returned. And I tell you what, it's quite a relief when you think about it. I hadn't done it for some time, so actually going off the grid was a bit of a gift and kind of a transformation, if you will. We visited one place specifically that was the number 1 beach in the U.S., Siesta Key Beach, which I tell you, everyone should go there. That place is phenomenal. But going off the grid, it's interesting because although we think that we have to leave everything behind, the world actually doesn't stop. We just do ourselves. So I made the decision to actually stop. Sounds kind of simple, which it is, but to actually stop takes a lot of effort. But when you do, you realize the world that is around you. Being gone for 8 days, I kid you not, the entire time we were gone, I had no idea what day it was. I just knew what our plan was and where we had to be from day to day, but I didn't care what day of the week it was. It didn't matter to me. Why? Because I made the choice to do that, number 1, but also number 2, I had nothing to tie me to the days of the week. I had nothing to worry about. Say every Monday I send this newsletter out, every Tuesday I do a podcast, every Thursday I do a blog. I could have committed to those things, yes, but I decided to leave them behind. I could have planned ahead and posted everything and worried about it while I was gone just to make sure I had posted, but I figured, you know what? It's better that I don't. And it was interesting. I had never experienced that before. This was the first time that the days of the week and somewhat the time of the day disappeared. There were still 7 days in the week. There was still 24 hours in a day. There were still 365 days in a year, but I was no longer bound to them. I had no longer made the choice to say, okay, every Monday I will do this. Every Tuesday I will do this. Every Wednesday I will do this. No, I decided that, you know what? I do not care what time or day of the week it is. The only thing I care about is being present. Because I know over these next number of days, I have limited time to spend and enjoy that time with my family. Hence the reason I went off the grid. The other thing that I noticed was that my senses had heightened. It was interesting how much I was able to absorb from the temperature of the air to just a number of things that were visible in the surroundings I was at. For example, we went to a garden in South Carolina, Magnolia Plantation was the name of it, and they had a swamp. Beautiful swamp, by the way, and it was filled with alligators. And these alligators, there was no fence between me and the alligator. And they weren't everywhere, but I mean, you really had no idea where they were until they surfaced or they were sitting on the side. But overall, they're pretty afraid of humans, and during the morning hours and the afternoon hours, they just like to sit in the sun and get warm and stay warm. So they're only a threat if you provoke them. However, walking around the lake, walking around the swamp as well, you could do nothing other than make sure that your senses were heightened, that you were aware of everything. For me, as a martial artist, I'm also looking for potential escape routes. How would I deal with certain situations if they were to come about? So I'm always preparing. At the same time, though, besides the alligators, I mean, the landscape, the plantation itself was absolutely gorgeous. And the colors were so vivid. The smells, the sounds, the just everything about that garden itself and that plantation and that swamp was absolutely magnificent. Now, if I had gone there with the mindset of, okay, before this day is over, I have to make sure that I finish my next podcast, and what is it that I will be talking about? Well, what will I be writing on my next blog, or who's my patient that I have first thing the next day, or what lecture will I be talking about this coming weekend? If I had all of those things on my mind, there was absolutely no way I would have been able to absorb everything that was available to me right there on that beautiful plantation. So being able to go off the grid literally took me away from everything that I chose before I had left to bound myself to. So my senses were heightened, which allowed me to enhance the experiences that I had during the time I was away with my family. To be able to see my children laugh and run and play more so than I do here at home, because they're either at school while I'm at work, or we're working on their after school activities while I'm helping them. It was an escape. It was an escape. It was the ability to go off the grid that we had designed for ourselves. And perhaps also on your end, you might have been expecting me. You might have been expecting my podcast or my blog or the newsletter that I send out every week. Or maybe you had an appointment with me that I had to move to the following week because we had well, of course, I wasn't there. So if you were expecting me, why is that? Do you depend on me? Or do you just find it interesting and entertaining, some of the materials that I produce for all of you to listen to or to read to, or do you look forward to the treatments that you have on a weekly basis? If so, that's great. And when I'm absent, or if something were to happen that were to put me out of commission for a short time, or God forbid, a long time, what kind of responsibility should you take and put forth for yourself? So my disappearance doesn't necessarily mean that you're off the hook. Me going off the grid does not mean that you now have the freedom to do whatever it is that you used to do. Sure, we all can take time for ourselves and enjoy the things that we like to and indulge in maybe a good meal, or take some time to go watch that movie or that we haven't seen that others have. But the fact that maybe you have been expecting the podcast or expecting the blog, or looking forward to that treatment that you would be having, think of that as a guidepost for you to practice what it is that you and I talk about, or that you listen to here on these podcasts. So these lessons that I sort of underlay in these messages that I give out to all of you, this one particularly, off the grid, in this lesson and all of the others, you should be practicing them. You should be putting them into action in your own life when I'm not present here. Because if you can't do that, then it's just sort of for your own pleasure. So my goal here is not to make sure that I'm providing things that are of pleasure to you, but are of things that are actionable, things that you can actually apply in your own life. So in this podcast specifically, going off the grid, when was the last time you went off the grid? When was the last time that you took time for yourself? When was the last time you said, okay, this vacation I devote to myself? Or, like I did, I devote to myself and my family. I will tie myself in no way, shape, or form to the work that I have that awaits me at the end of this time away. I am officially off the grid. I am disconnecting. Now, I was still connected a little bit. I wanted to share with everybody some of the images and videos of my family being away, a little bit about our experience while we were gone. So I stayed a little bit connected, but I disconnected myself to all of the obligations that I knew I would have when I would return. Why? Because while I'm away, what's the use? Why should I let my mental capacity be attached to something that I have no reason to connect to at that period of time? And the same goes for you. If you do make a decision to go off the grid here in the coming future, perhaps for one of the weekends coming up, or Memorial Day, or at the first week of summer if you have kids and you're ready to go on that summer vacation as soon as they get out of school, be ready. Prepare yourself to go off the grid. Get all of the stuff you need to done ahead of time. Plan your off the grid time ahead of time. Get ready so that when that moment comes, when that minute arrives where it's time for you to leave and get off the grid, and that you actually can. We all need to take the time for ourselves. We all need to make sure that we can fully immerse ourselves in the experiences that we have in this life, because that's really all that we have. When it's time for us to leave this earth, nothing else can come with us. The only thing that we can enjoy before our last breath is the memories of the experiences that we have taken to enjoy in this lifetime. So I encourage you strongly to go off the grid as often as possible. I encourage you to give yourself the opportunity to see what it feels like when time actually disappears. When your senses are so heightened that it's almost overwhelming to allow for that overall experience to be absorbed into your body, into your brain, the colors, the feeling of the things under your fingers, or for me in this case, the feeling of the sand on the Siesta Key beach, which is absolutely, I can't even put it into words other than just saying it's magnificent. So this last trip where I went off the grid for 8 days, a road trip that I will never forget, and I hope that the next time we do it, which will be hopefully very soon, that will even top this trip. So going off the grid, completely off the grid if you choose. Leave your devices behind, leave the internet behind, take nothing else with you but you, yourself, and all the supplies that you will need to survive during the time that you will be away. So allow yourself to be immersed in the nature that exists out in the world, whether you decide to go camping or whether you decide to just fly off to some remote corner of the earth and sit on the beach and do absolutely nothing but dig your toes in the sand and listen to the water around you. Give yourself the chance to go off the grid. And you can even do it in your own home. Every time you get home from work, shut down your phone, turn off the devices, find a nice quiet corner of your house, one that you devote to being off the grid. Make it your off the grid spot, your off your grid space, or off the grid room. Bring your favorite drink with you. Bring your favorite book with you, or just listen to some music, or whatever it might be. Design a space for you to go off the grid. If you need it more frequently, design it for something that's more frequently. When you get home, leave your work at work, leave your home at home. And also when you have those chances to go off the grid for a long period of time, whether it's a week, couple weeks, a month, couple months, or maybe even longer, give yourself the chance to enjoy it. Do it. Go off the grid. Be away from the things that constantly bombard you on a day-to-day basis. You only get a chance to live this life once. So you might as well spend a large portion of it off the grid. And you don't have to do it alone. You can do it with others. But being off the grid just simply means to be able to enjoy the experiences of your life fully. It simply just means being present. Because that's all I did when I was away. I was just completely present. I made the choice to be present. I made the choice to be in the moment for the entire time I was away from my usual day-to-day activities. So, be present in your life. Be present when you're on the grid. Be present when you're off the grid, especially when you're off the grid. Take that time for yourself. And I hope that you can do it soon, and I hope that you can do it often. Not just here with me during these podcasts, but on your own. That's all for this podcast, Off the Grid. Take some time to plan your next trip, to plan your next moment where you can actually go off the grid yourself. Trust me, you won't regret it, just like I didn't. That's all for this podcast, Off the Grid. I'm Justin Flinner, and this is the Justin Flinner Podcast by My Mentor Medicine. I'll talk to you guys next time. Have an awesome day.